Hi, and welcome to today's class. This is Trevor Conkergood from Sunset Stitches, and I'm going to be the presenter for today's class, which is about open and curved fill types and just the different elements of the Wilcom Embroidery Studio software. So, welcome to today's class. Before I get started, I'll just give you a little bit of an idea of what you can expect. First of all, it's a webinar, so you're attending live, and by now you should be able to see my computer screen, and you should be able to hear my voice. Of course, I don't see your screen or hear your voice, and so what you'll need to do is to communicate with me during class, you can ask a question using the questions box. So if you don't know where to find your questions box, there should be a control panel that comes with the GoToWebinar service. If it's not kind of immediately obvious to you where it is, it could be minimized, in which case it's a small orange arrow that you're looking for on the right-hand side of your computer screen. Yeah, and if you open that up, it should show you that there's a bunch of options, and one of them is a questions box. And just maybe so that you could give me a hand, I'm looking right now at my questions box, and if somebody wants to go ahead and just let me know that you can hear my voice and that everything sounds good technically, then I'll know that we're clear to get started. Excellent. Okay, great. I got a couple of responses. Nice to hear from everybody. Thank you. Okay, great. Lots of awesomes. Okay, so today's class, we're going to talk about the Wilcom Embroidery Studio software, and specifically the elements for open fill and curved fill. And I guess one more thing before I get started is just maybe a little bit about me and how it is that I became, I guess, a training partner of Wilcom software. I'm basically a big fan of Wilcom Embroidery Studio software, and I've been a long-term customer of Wilcom, and really I'm a second-generation embroidery designer. I learned in a family business. My father sold embroidery machines for McPherson, so he was selling Baird embroidery machines to people in Western Canada, and as he helped them establish their businesses, then I was their source for digitizing. And so I learned in a family business. We called our digitizing service Stitchitize, and so yeah, it eventually grew to be quite a medium-sized digitizing team of people, like a dozen people working together, artists, programmers, proofing department, and that's how I learned about digitizing. And certainly it's my pleasure to share with you the things that I've learned about creating embroidery designs, and that's why I've become an authorized training partner for Wilcom software. And certainly if you'd like to get in touch with me or know more about me, this is my email address, trevor@sunsetstitches.com. Okay, so all of that said, we're going to take a look at the Wilcom elements. And I really love what Wilcom's done recently with their website, and specifically with the introduction of Embroidery Studio 3. And I guess just the way that they've kind of packaged all of this awesome software together. And so yeah, we have different levels. The base level would be TrueSizer to me, and then of course we've got Deco Studio and Embroidery Studio, which is what I love and use every day. Now, looking on their website, this is what I found was sort of a little bit of a map as to how you can purchase that. So I'm not sure what software you have, but I use Embroidery Studio, and I have all of the elements installed on my software. But you may not have all of the same sort of tools and features on your desktop as I do on mine. Now, part of that may be because of the way I customize my desktop, which you can ask me about if you need to, but more specifically might be because you may not have all of the elements available, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about. So yeah, they're available in groups. Creativity, productivity, and decoration are kind of generalized groups of the elements, and then you'll see that each one of these elements has some specific tools and effects that go with it. So today we're going to take a look at this open and shading fills and curve fills. So the first two in the group. And so when you talk about open and shading fills, these are the tools that we'll be looking at today. So accordion, spacing, color blending, stippling, cross stitch, and trapunto. So these are just examples that I've taken right from the Wilcom website to give myself kind of a little guideline, just so you can be aware of what we're going to work on in the next hour. And certainly there's lots of time. So if you would like to ask a question, there should be no trouble if you want to ask a question and I can answer it during class. Now, once I start presenting, I don't really keep my eye on the questions box per se, so I'll check it a few times throughout the class and see if anybody's asked a question, because I have it closed right now. I wouldn't even know if you were asking one. Then the other sort of general topic will be the curved fills, and so here we're going to look at Florentine Effect, Liquid Effect, and Contour Effect. So these are all things, and I've got examples of designs that were made that incorporate these different, I guess, features or elements. So yeah, all right, before I get started, I will just take a quick peek at my questions box and make sure that we're good to go. Okay, everybody can see me fine. Kim wants to know where my name's from. I think it would originate from Scotland, but I'm certainly just a Canadian boy now, living in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan is where I'm coming from today. All right, so we're going to just take a look at these kind of in order. So I'll start with accordion spacing, and what I'll do now is just pop over to my workspace. And like I said, you may not have your desktop laid out exactly the same as mine. But in general, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to show some of these tools. So I have opened up a few of them already. I'll switch to the design that incorporates some accordion stitch spacing. And what you're looking at right now is a design, I guess like a Japanese pagoda or whatever those are called, but the Japanese sun anyway. And you can see here that the color white has been set to kind of look like it fades off into, you know, less and less. It's meant to help blend two colors together. The object right here, the white, if I select that, and you'll notice if you're looking at the Effects tab that there's a tab for accordion spacing. And so the accordion spacing has been turned on. It's got a minimum and a maximum setting. So the larger the number, the further the distance between the rows of thread. And so yeah, you get to adjust the profile. So I guess I have it set as like a decreasing profile, which means it gets, you know, from one density to the other. And so it's increasing or decreasing. And then these are different sort of, I guess, exponential profile. You know, they kind of show you what it means. So this one's going to go from open density to sort of tighter density and then back to more open density, concave and concave-convex. Anyway, pretty scientific names for a new tool that you can use. So what I'll do, maybe I'll just grab my contour fill, or my complex fill tool, I should say, and I'm going to go ahead and digitize a shape. I notice my mouse let go. Maybe while I'm digitizing this, I can explain a little bit about that. I'll come back to it in a second. So I've created a shape. And so I guess first of all, I want to apply, maybe I'll use, it doesn't really matter which I use, but I'll go with a tatami fill. And the option is here. It's called accordion spacing. And I can turn it on just by clicking on this button here. So now immediately you notice something, and that is that you can see through the embroidery, and that's because of the spacing. The minimum is 0.4, which is sort of our default, you know, coverage. And then the maximum is now set up to 2 millimeters, which is, you know, lots of distance between the rows of stitches, and therefore you can see through it, which is a pretty good reason that you might be turning the underlay off. Okay, so I'm just going to show this without the automatic underlay shown, and now what you see is what's remaining is just the top stitching, and you can see the effect of the accordion spacing. So yeah, that's found if you're looking at the underlay tab, you have to switch to effects, and this is where you can adjust. And so, like I said, the minimum was set at 0.4 and the maximum is set at 2 millimeters. If you want, you can open that up to be 3 millimeters, and it'll, I guess, adjust the way that the accordion spacing works. So yeah, you can probably imagine lots of great uses for, I guess, creating, like we did with the sun here, just fading off into nothing, or maybe more specifically with actually blending color, which I'll just swap over to show you my next sort of tab, or my next topic is going to be color blending. And so the concept here is, same idea. You're going to use an accordion spacing, but you're going to sort of choose two colors to blend together using that. Now, there's lots of ways to blend colors and shade colors, and a lot of these things are going to actually go together. So you'll find that as I go through class, and then maybe I'll start talking about Trapunto, and then I'll be able to show you how Trapunto can tie into accordion spacing. So really, there's a lot of these tools work together and in combination to get the correct effect. I have some designs open for color blending. So I've got this rose design, which I guess I can show you. I've got some stitch outs, so the rose, some shade, some clouds, and even this sun design is a good example of using this tool. Okay, so here you can see there's a sun. It's got yellow fill, sort of blending into red fill. And actually you can see the red fill is on top of the yellow fill, and they have been blended together using that accordion spacing. Now, they look interesting because they also have a Florentine effect applied, which is why the stitches are curved. So that's a good example of what I'm talking about. You often use these tools in combination. When I get to doing the Florentine fill, I'll show you how exactly that works. For now, I'll just maybe draw any old shape. So again, I'm just going to choose my complex fill tool. If I left click, I will get corner points. If I right click, I'll get rounded points. And when I hit enter, it'll close the shape. I'll hit enter again to just give default start and stop. Now, if I select that shape, and again, I'm going to choose just a straight to Tommy for my stitch type. And now the tool that I want to use here, and notice I have this tool group open and sitting on my toolbar. You maybe don't. This tool group actually comes from on the left here. See, if I click and hold, there's the same tool group. And all I've done is just simply grabbed on these little dotted line and click and drag to make it floating. And then instead of having it floating, I've just stuck it up and onto my desktop and onto the workspace, sort of like this. It's just see if I can get it to where I like it, and when I let go, that's where it is. So this is where I found the tool, which is shown here, called color blending, and I'm going to click on it. And so what was I guess a brown piece of tatami fill is going to be blended, and right now it's showing like purple and red, and you can choose the colors you want to adjust. So if you want to go with yellow and red, you know, such as the circle was, fine, or it doesn't really matter. It can be two shades of blue. That's really up to the embroidery machine operator anyway. The point is, on your screen, if you want to see what it's going to look like, you might choose contrasting colors. To me, that's more what I usually choose. All right, so anyway, again, now you have that same idea of accordion spacing, just times two. So you have color 1 and color 2, each with a minimum and a maximum and a profile to choose from. And then when you say OK, there's the finished result. So I'll just kind of get a little closer so you can see how really what it is. In fact, if I look at the object list, you can see that I've created one shape, but the software immediately duplicated it and applied an accordion spacing to both of them. And they're actually grouped together. So they come grouped. If you want, you can use the arrange and ungroup, and then you would be able to, I guess, modify each layer individually. So if you wanted to have some change after the fact and you liked one of the layers but not the other, you can edit it independently. But that's the idea. You can use those in blending colors together. Okay, now maybe I'll pop up my questions box. See how it's going. Everybody seems pretty content, so I'll take that as meaning enjoying everything and go out. So I'll keep showing. My next element is stipple fill. And so you'll probably find, I mean, obviously people think of quilting when they think of stippling, but I love to use it in designing, embroidery designs, and I think you might find there's lots of really creative uses for stippling, and certainly some of them could be applied commercially, not just on a creative sort of crafting your traditional quilting style, but all sorts of reasons. So let's take a look at creating some stipple fill, and what I'm going to do, let's see, I have a design I can open up or two with some stippling in them. So we'll say open. So in general here, it's pretty obvious that the area, I guess, using it for this style, the area that gets sewn flat has been covered with a stipple fill. It's a quick way of filling in an area. In this case, you can see where it's combined with multiple layers. This could be a quilt, but it could also be a jacket back where you've got quilting in between, you know, 2 layers of jacket, a lining and then a top, and then in between you would have some insulation. Same concept. Whatever you sew with the stippling will sew down flat, and whatever you outline or leave void will puff up. And so that's kind of the concept with both this stippled heart and or the stippled flower design. So it's a very simple tool. I guess in general you draw a shape. So again, I'll just create any old shape. Select enter. Instead of choosing right now it's set, is this satin fill, as you can see here. And then stipple fill is just one of the choices of fill type. So if I come over here and select stipple fill, it's going to fill that area in with stippling. Now, stipple fill has its own sort of specific settings that you get to adjust. And so these are the settings for a stipple fill type. You've got the length of the run stitch, and you can set a minimum length. You get to set a cord gap. How close will it stick to the line? You get a run count, so if is it a single line or a double line. You get to adjust the loop spacing, which is kind of going to, I guess, adjust how much of the stipple effect you get, and you get to choose an inset amount. Now, I'll show you the loop spacing, just example. I'll change it from the default, which was 7.5 to 3 millimeters, and hit enter, and then you'll see that the object has lots more sort of stipple run lines filling in the area. So that's the idea, and you'll notice up here that there's actually several types. I'll just click on the circle tool and click and drag to create a circle and make it be kind of perfect circle. Notice that I have not just stipple fill, but I have stipple fill backstitch, so stipple backstitch, and stipple stem stitch. So if I choose stipple backstitch, and again, I'm just going to set that loop spacing to be 3 millimeters, so I get more. The thing that changes here is I also get a thickness and overlap setting, and those are sort of the default settings that you get with a backstitch fill. And so the difference here is this. If I zoom in closely, instead of being a single sort of forward stitch type, it's going to give you a forward and a back, and then forward and back with a small amount of column width set to that, and it just gives you basically a fatter line. And that's, so the difference there is, notice in this little bowl that I made, that's all that really is stippling, and it's been done in backstitch. Now, the thing that was unique about this bowl was I didn't just make one row of it or one layer of it. I copied and pasted it 3 times and rotated them basically. So we could say copy and paste and then just rotate that object so that it has a different sort of coverage of those stipples. And so I did that 3 times to get enough layers that, so what I've done is I've stitched it on water dissolving stabilizer, and it creates a quick and easy lace bowl. And this is, for me, it's been a popular item to embroider if I'm going out to a dinner party, because I can show up and give the host a gift, and I usually leave it I just trim away the excess stabilizer, so it's just really a big embroidery circle, and leave it to the host and the guests to try and guess what it is. And so it creates some fun and interesting dinner conversation. And then at some point in time, you can explain that it's actually going to create something and it's a bowl. And, before the time dinner is finished, you can dissolve the bowl and let it dry on top of a little dish or a glass. And yeah, it's a fun thing to do with your embroidery. So that's stippling. Certainly a simple and easy effect, but lots of interesting. So like I said, those are kind of creative things, but I think you could find commercial applications for these as well. So the next, maybe I'll just close a few of my windows that I have open now. The next design we'll take a look at, or the next element we'll take a look at, is cross stitch. And so here, I'll just show you the title slide. So yeah, we'll talk about creating cross stitch. And again, not just for your sort of old-fashioned handmade stuff. There's lots of new and interesting ways and reasons to apply cross stitch to your embroidery designs. All right, I'll just close a couple more of these. And I'll say open. And so in the cross stitch designs, maybe I'll just open up this warrior design. And so basically it's another style of fill. So just like any other style of fill, you create a shape and then you choose what kind it is. And in this case, I've used the cross stitch to fill in this kind of cool Japanese manga artwork. Now, if I was to just create a shape, so again, I'll just use my complex fill tool and draw, any old shape you want. Select my shape, and I have the option of cross stitch as a fill type. All right, so when you look closely, you can see that the area has been filled in specifically with it's a little bit open, as you could see from my photographs. You get to see through the stitching to your fabric a little bit. It doesn't have any underlay underneath it. It's meant to kind of emulate a hand-stitched design, but it's certainly sort of relatively straightforward way of filling in an area. It doesn't actually save. You'll notice that this area that I've made here, this large area, it's got 15,000 stitches in it. So even though it's a little bit open, it's actually fairly well covered. If I was just to switch that over to be, let's say, a tatami fill, all right, so now it's actually less stitches. So it gives you an idea of you're not exactly saving stitches. It's more for an effect. You can see here the object that with sort of standard tatami fill is 7,619 stitches. So using the cross stitch, now you can adjust that, going back to the cross stitch setting, because with cross stitch you have the ability to set, I guess, the number of stitches per inch or the number of stitches per millimeter. These are kind of standard ones. They actually call it a fabric count, because when you're doing hand cross stitch, you would have fabric that would have an exact number of squares in an inch, and you would match your pattern, your cross-stitch artwork would be set to the same number of stitches per inch as the fabric that you purchased, and then you could literally count the number of squares over and across that you needed to do. You get to choose. Oh, here's one of the reasons why it's so many. It's set on 4 count, which is going to do every line, every cross not twice, but 4 times. If I adjust that to 2, that's going to take some of those stitches out. And then you have the style of cross. Full cross versus upright cross. And so I'll do all that. And I don't want to change them like automatically. Sorry, I just want to adjust them. Now, so all that said, I thought, oh, the number of crosses, number of threads, I wanted to adjust to 2. Yeah, so now it's 10,000 stitches. So, okay, it's not as drastic a change as it was when I had it set, with the 4 count, but it's still 10,000, still more than 7,000. So you get the idea. Even though you see the fabric through it, it's quite a specific pattern, not something that you've done just to save some stitching. But that said, it can be very fun. In this design here, I've actually combined it with using motive fills. So here's cross stitch, but it's used to outline areas that are filled in with different motifs. And I'm not planning on using motive fill today, but it's another one of the elements that I'll work into one of my future classes. So again, I guess I'm combining different elements to use to create this little design here. All right, so that's cross-stitch fill. Now maybe I'll pop open my questions box again and just see if anybody had any questions. Oops, missed opening the box. Okay, I have one question that's a good one. I guess going back, it was when I was doing the stippling. How do you create, as I had with the design with the heart, and I guess I had the design with the flower, same thing. How do you create the hole in the design? Like, how do you have the stippling to go around that area? And so that's a good question. I'll show you with this stippled flower. So the idea is that you have some embroidery element that's in the middle, and you want to stipple around that. Let's give it a second to open up. Yeah, so you could probably do that in an automatic fashion, but even just to show you in simple terms, if you have a shape, so I'll just draw a shape just to show you. So it could be any shape that you wanted to fill in with stipple. So we'll select the shape and give it a stippled fill. And then, if there was some embroidery element on the inside that we wanted to void out, so we wanted to put the shape over top of it, what I would actually do is use the sort of second layer of that object and define the center hole. So right now I have the object selected. If I click again on the complex fill tool, it actually asks me to enter point 1 of object. Oh, here, I gotta do that again. Click on the tool. Okay, and it asks me to enter point 1 on boundary 2. So boundary 2 becomes the hole. And now in the case of that lotus flower, you would draw specifically that shape. Now, okay, I didn't explain what happened the first time, but I'll explain it this time. It just let go. So it may be confusing to you to see that happen. I'm not surprised. I run a virtual computer, which means my PC is actually a computer on top of my Apple computer, my Macintosh computer, and which works fine, by the way. And you just have to have Windows saved into a sort of a window on top of your Apple. The point is, it runs fine all week long, but there is a conflict between my GoToWebinar and the virtual machine, and I sometimes find that I'll be right in the middle of digitizing a shape and it'll let go. It won't happen other than in my webinars, which is the only reason why I can still tolerate it. But I do apologize if I get... So all right, I explained what happened. I'm going to do it again. So look, I select the object, I click on the complex fill tool, and then I draw the hole. Now, you would draw a hole that represented whatever you didn't want to fill in with the stippling. So that's a great question. And so in the case of this design here, you would have to draw a hole that went around specifically the shape that's there. Now, there would be other ways to do that. I didn't want to deviate too much from today's class, but you may be able to use like an automatic remove function. But the simplest way you could do it is just to cut the hole out yourself. So select the fill, draw a big box, cut the fill out, and cut a hole out where you want that, which is basically just boundary number 2 of your complex fill shape. Okay, so the good question. Thank you. And so continuing on, cross-stitch fill. Now we're going to take a look at the Trapunto Effect. And so, yeah, I'll go ahead and open up. I got more than one design set up for Trapunto, the cattails. Oh, and this embossed flower on a towel. These are examples of using Trapunto. Now, if I'm just going to say open, and I'll open up the rose design. Okay. So the idea with Trapunto is that you're going to be having, I'll just hide the vectors that are hidden. You're going to be having an area that's probably going to have an open density. I guess oftentimes I think of Trapunto as similar to what I did with the stippling. One area is sewn flat, another area is left to open up. I think in traditional terms that was what Trapunto was. But in this case, this tool becomes extremely important with almost every design that you do any shading whatsoever, and I'll kind of explain why. And this is where I was getting to. A lot of these things work in conjunction. So, okay, just in general, I'm going to draw a shape. Any old shape. And I'll select that shape. I have to select the shape, sorry. And I'm going to give it a tatami fill. Now, I guess the adjustment that I want to use is here. It's called, is here, Trapunto. Now, maybe what I'll do is I'll kind of show the why. So before I do anything, I'm just going to take my my shape that I've digitized, and I'll look at its special settings, or its tatami settings, and it's set as tatami fill with 0.4 millimeter density. Now, what if I open up the density? What if I wanted to be able to see through the stitches, such as when you're doing blending of colors? So now that I've taken that spacing and increased it, you can see right through the stitches. Now, obviously, the next thing you notice is the underlay, which again is one of those things that often we turn off. So I have my software set, to work with the fabric choices and then just automatically generate underlay. You may not have that, but the point is you want to have underlay turned off to look at this. So there I have my object, and basically you can see the top stitching, you can see some travel stitches underneath, and that's really what this Trapunto tool is all about. It's going to get rid of these travel stitches. And so right now, if I come over and I click on it, Trapunto settings, notice what it did. It made the travel stitches that used to walk kind of directly underneath the stitching stick to the edges. So that is something that can be, really helpful when you don't want that travel stitches to be underneath. Now, it also makes all stitches stick to the edge. So I'm going to get sort of closer to the design a little bit. And I'll hit undo. Okay, so there it was before. So on top of changing that travel line to go along the edge, it also adjusts the way the stitches stick to the edges. So I'll turn it on again, Trapunto. So see what it did? It made all the stitches stay along that edge. And this has just so many commercial applications. You could be sewing in, an open density fill over top of a specialty piece of fabric, and then you're going to put an outline around it, and you want all of the stitching to be, stuck to the edges so that nothing unattractive about it, I guess. So the only other way, you can get rid of, so for example, if I'm going to turn off select my object, turn off the Trapunto. Yes, you can adjust these travel stitches, but you have to, first of all, have a shape that, right now my stitch, if I say reshape, the stitch angle for this shape is one that could actually go, see it set on this angle? So if I chose to start here and finish here, we would have no traveling underneath. It could literally start there and sew all the way over to here. But as soon as you want to move anything, such as the starting point, where you get travel stitches, or the exit point, where you're going to get travel stitches, or the stitch angle, can cause you to have, new travel stitches. So those stitches are important. They make sure that the machine doesn't need to have unnecessary jumps when it's sewing. But if you don't want them, or you want them to be hidden, then that's the point. You can use this Trapunto. Now, this is where I was saying before, these things can be combined. So for example, I can also have accordion spacing on my stitch. If I don't have Trapunto on my accordion spacing, you still get that line that's walking, and depending on the reshape and the starting points and the exit points, you will have a line that walks underneath. So if you're using accordion spacing, you may also want to be using Trapunto. Yeah, so that's basically what this rose design is actually just simply taking the same shape twice. So I don't have accordion spacing on mine. I just have open spacing. And I just have that, my shapes of the rose, I've just used copy and paste to make 2 copies of them. And then on the second copy, I've used a contrasting stitch angle to create, you know, in essence, the similar sort of effect as even cross stitch, filling it in. The main difference here is, and you'll notice with the cross stitch that you would get rough edges. It would always give you a perfect cross. Whereas with this, it'll actually give you a smooth edge. The crosses don't kind of stick in and out of each other. So in cross stitch, that's sort of the small difference between 2 layers of Trapunto versus 1 layer of cross stitch. Anyway, that and the way that it sews, because the cross stitches are actually stitch in rows of X's, and this will actually stitch in 2 rows of lines that each are at different stitch angles. Okay, so those are the elements that make up the group of open and shading, open fills and shading. And now we're going to take a look at the curved fills group. And so maybe before I move on, I'll just once again pop open my questions box and see if anybody else wanted to ask any questions. Yeah, so I don't think I have any new questions just yet. Everybody seems happy. We'll continue along. So now we're going to look at Florentine Effect. And I have this fancy little beta fish. What I'll do, I'll just say open and get the Florentine beta fish to open up. So the idea here is that instead of creating an area that has parallel fill, we can create an area and then apply Florentine fill. And that's what you see when you look at this beta fish, and if you look at the stitch out of them, how these fills have the appearance of a rounded stitch like this. And so that's made very easy by using the Florentine stitch effect. Now, to create something, I'm just going to go ahead and create a shape. And again, it can be pretty much any shape you want. And the first thing is, I'm going to select my shape. Now, notice, here's the effect right here, Florentine Effect. And it's gray. Can't use it. The reason is because whenever something's gray, it means you'll need to do something first before you can use this tool. And in this case, Florentine fill doesn't work with the satin stitch type. See, I have a satin stitch type for this fill shape. It's got an auto split, which is what gives it these kind of rows of satin column look to it. But if I change it to be a tatami fill, now notice I've got the option for the Florentine Effect. So before I even apply the Florentine Effect, I'll just get a little closer and I'll choose the reshape tool, and you'll see that you have a single stitch angle for this shape. I can choose any stitch angle, but all the thread are parallel. Now that's where this tool changes things. So I'll select the object and I'll now click on the Florentine Effect. And you'll notice right away that it starts to look like it's got a curve to it. And if I go now to the Reshape Object option, tool, you'll notice that my fill stitch angle is now a semicircle. It's got a square point and then a rounded point and a square point. And you can actually move those points to take on any angle you want. In fact, you can add multiple points. So I'll click on the shape to add another point to create a contour line, which will be, I guess, mirrored in my design. So you get to create that sort of contour of the shape. Now, if I apply, I'm just going to open this up. So the object, the fill type, is a tatami, and the stitch spacing is set at 4. If I open it up to 2 millimeters, it'll allow you to see through the object more easily. Now, maybe even a darker color would allow it to show through better, such as this blue or something. Now, again, with the underlay, which is actually starting to take on a pretty interesting look with the two layers kind of open together because they're going at, I guess, what would be considered a perpendicular stitch angle to each other. If I turned on the Trapunto, it would get all the underlay stitches to stick together. Oh, it's not doing a perfect job, though. I wonder if I could tweak that. But if I just turn off the underlay, now you get the concept of what this can really be used to do. And so by blending multiple layers of color together in combination with something like the Florentine effect, you can create lots of dimension and, I guess, texture in a design, whether it be a person's face or shading on a mascot. Sky's the limit. So, maybe I make these tools look a little bit crafty and creative, but really they're very important when it comes down to just doing outstanding commercial embroidery. So that is a very fun effect called the Florentine effect. And I'll just do it one more time for you. So you draw the shape, and when you hit enter, you select your shape. I'll change its color again so we can see a little better. I'm going to change the stitch angle, or sorry, stitch type to be tatami. I'm going to apply the Florentine effect. I'm going to turn off the underlay, and I'm going to open up the stitch spacing on the fill so that we can see through it. Now here's where, even though I have that Florentine effect, I still need to use that Trapunto to clean it up. Do you see why I say they're so important to working together? Because without the Trapunto tool, the Florentine fill tool doesn't have nearly as many, I guess, uses. So yeah, that's probably why they're sold together as a group. When we look back on this one of the earlier tiles, how they had all the orange ones put together. Well, it's because we often apply them simultaneously to our objects. Okay, so what's left? I got 15 minutes to go and a couple more tools to show. The liquid effect. This is a fun one, as shown here in this design of this heart. I will go ahead and open up the design. Okay. So the effect has been applied on the center of this heart design. If I choose reshape, you'll notice something, different from the Florentine effect, and that is that there's two lines, one above and one below. And what happens is, here I've got kind of like a semicircle at the top, and I've got like a bit of an angle at the bottom. And so you'll notice that the stitch angles try to, I guess, slowly transform from the first angle to the second angle. And that's why they call it liquid. So yeah, if I want to, I can adjust, like the shape of the different lines, and then that adjusts the way the stitching gets created. So yeah, that's okay. I'll demonstrate creating one of those, or an object, and applying that effect. So I'll just draw again a shape using my complex fill. I'm only using it because it's a quick tool to use. These things can be applied to objects that have been made with any of the tools, whether it be your fusion fill or your input A or input C, whatever. You can apply these different effects. Maybe I can demonstrate that in a minute. So here I've got my sort of very complex looking shape. Again, the tool, here's the tool for liquid, is gray because I need to turn on tatami fill first. Then I can choose the liquid effect. And now if I choose reshape, you can see that I've got two lines which I get to have the opportunity to, I guess, adjust what that stitch angle of each of these lines is going to be. And then if I want, I can... You don't have to have the stitching open, by the way. These can be, with sort of standard density fills. The effect can be applied. I only like turning the stitch densities to be open so that you can see the way the stitching is being affected by the design, by the tools that I'm using. So this is the liquid fill effect. Yeah. Anyway, very similar to the Florentine fill. Now you have two lines is the difference, and those are the two tools. So yeah. Okay, one more tool to go. And that is the contour effect. And it's certainly a case of last but not least. This one's got, as you can see, a very interesting effect that can be used. In fact, it's what I used to fill the outline of the shape of this heart. So, yeah, did I have a design that I was going to open? Oh, it was the rose design. Let's open up that contour rose design. Okay, and so you can see here, if we take a look, the way that the stitches have been sort of filled into the areas of this rose to take on this contour effect. Now, here, I'm going to start out with, this is the Input A tool. And Input A works really well with this effect. So the idea with Input A is, you put in the sets of points to define a stitch angle. So it's like this, 1, 2, side 1 and then side 2, and then I'm back to side 1 and I put in 2 more points, 1, 2, and 1, 2, and I draw sets of points like that. Now I'll hit enter, so you can see that the stitches, so I'll zoom out. Here's my first stitch angle and my next one. So I define not only the shape of the object, but the stitch angle of the object when I use the Input A tool. Now, I'll select this object. Sorry, I want to select that object and show you the reshape of it. So you can see here how I adjust the shape by having sort of one point on each side of the shape, and then I can adjust a stitch angle. So that's your Input A tool. Now, if I take an object that was made using Input A, I can apply the contour stitch spacing to that, so creating you know, the effect of the rose, all right, with the contour. So here I'm just going to apply that now and see what it's done. It's taken and created all the stitches to fill in that area. Now again, you have the ability with contour stitching to adjust the stitch spacing. So if you want it to be like I had with my rose, the stitches were quite open and left so that you could see through them, as opposed to the liquid heart that I had done. Whoops, I went the wrong one. Liquid heart, where I had actually taken an object, I think it was made using Input C, and then applied. So I took an object that was made, you know, like an outline, and then applied to that the contour fill type, which is what gave me, you know, the rows of stitching going back and forth like that. So all of these special effects that we've looked at today have, you know, I guess take the embroidery design from ordinary to extraordinary, and whether you're a, you know, crafty type of embroiderer or whether you're a commercial embroiderer, lots of great applications for these special effects. So anyway, those are just a few of the many, many special effects that we saw that were available with the Wilcom Elements embroidery studio software is what I use. You may have Deco Studio, but still these elements can be purchased. So that kind of concludes the designs that I prepared for today. Now I'm just going to pop back over to my control panel and see if there are any more questions. Okay, now give me a second and I'll read. Tiana's got a question about using the liquid in a horizontal, and yeah, you know, I'll have to give that a try. So vertical, not horizontal, sorry. Yeah, let me give it a try. She said she has some troubles. I know in general with the liquid, it does, the lines, they're a little sensitive. If you adjust them too much, they do want to default back to the beginning. Perhaps I can help. So what you're saying is that when you try and put the lines, now, if I wonder what you're saying is you're choosing reshape and then you're trying to put the lines, whoops, my screen moved. Let me just give myself a bit more space. Because anytime the lines cross over the shape, I wonder what would happen. Yeah, I can see what you're saying about trying to get it to go horizontal or vertical. What if I rotated the object first? What happens? So I think that might be your solution. Let me know if that is not something you've already tried. So rather than trying to move the lines to be sort of vertical around my shape, what I had to do was actually rotate the direction of my shape so that I could get these lines to be vertical. Now, like I said, if you pull these lines to be, I guess, across your shape, they just go back to default. And oh, there, that's interesting. So maybe that's what you're saying, is that when they default, they actually put themselves right back to horizontal. Well, I'm going to think about that. That's a good question. I'll give it as feedback anyways to my good friends at the Wilcom office, which as you know, I'm sure they are always very welcome to receive any feedback about the way the tools work. But yeah, that does seem a little bit annoying. The general thing is that you need to make these lines stay outside. Otherwise, they do default. As soon as you cross over like that, that's when that happens. Or if you try and, you know, make too complex of a shape, that's when I think it often will happen. Certainly if they cross the line, that's when they default. Anyway, hopefully that answers your question, and good luck to you guys. Now, I'll just take one more look at my questions box, see if anybody else is wanting to ask me any questions. By the way, I wanted to say special hi to my friend Jackie Green, who I've met several times, and I noticed she's attending class today. And yeah, everybody's giving me thanks for the great class and wonderful stuff. So, okay, great. I'm happy to hear everybody enjoyed the class. And it was certainly my pleasure to present the class. If you have any questions, certainly feel free to contact the people, your Wilcom representative, or if you need to get in touch with me, then that's my email address, trevor@sunsetstitches.com. I have recorded today's class, and if you would like to receive a copy of the class, then you could contact me or contact Wilcom, and I'm sure that they'll also be happy to get you a copy. So thank you very much for attending, and have a wonderful day. And bye-bye.